Hello and welcome back to another exciting video. This is Endo, and today we're going to be skipping through the live dev Q&A and talking about a few of the points, but we will look at all the points, but some of them are very important. So what we're going to do is talk about the important ones as well as check out the little ones. Does that make sense? Let's get started.
Okay, the first question by Neshok. Will there be more weapons, DLC content, like more weapon types, ammo, etc.?
The short answer is no, not within the next 6 months, but possibly if you keep bugging them after 6 months, there may be a possibility for a DLC weapons update. So make sure you keep bugging them in the official Stormworks server, I guess. And yeah, let's get to the next one.
And the next question, are wheel physics planning on being changed, mainly in regarding to the grip? So the answer is yes. We're going to be very careful to try and minimize the balance change. Obviously, if there's suddenly wheels start to be grippy, then that's obviously going to change the behavior of basically all wheeled vehicles. We'll try and keep it under control. We don't want to wreck anyone's creations.
So in short, yes, the answer is yes. They're going to revisit wheels. They're going to try not to break them. And he explains that there is a problem when they update. A lot of people get upset because they don't like the way that changes are made. Of course, he did mention the experimental branch, but there was never any talk during this whole Q&A that they were going to go ahead and bring back the experimental branch for any of the stuff that they're talking about. So that's a little worrisome. Hopefully they do, because I think that's important so that, as he says, they can do it carefully. Well, carefully with feedback, hopefully.
Can you add a container spawn at the Tajin docks? We can fly from FJ to Tajin with cargo. Yes, anything's possible. We are actually planning some more container style mission stuff. We've got some new ideas for missions. We're not planning on specifically adding container spawn at Tajin docks, but we are planning on doing I guess logistics missions stuff in the future, so expect that in the next 6 months, I would say.
So in short, more missions are coming. So for those folks that like to do the missions, there are more missions coming. And in fact, I think he dropped a spoiler alert about pets missions coming, or animal missions coming. We'll see later on in this video.
Will EXE modding ever be supported without being banned, such as a warning that says it's modded? So I think with this EXE modding stuff, I'm not sure we have banned anyone for modding their EXE file. I would say if you're modding your EXE file, I suppose, and then going and playing online and perhaps getting an unfair advantage, then that is cheating and you could potentially be game banned for that. But if you're not cheating, then we haven't ever banned anyone for that, I don't think. To be on the safe side, say, if you're going to mod your EXE file, just don't play online.
Okay, well that sounds like a fair deal if you're going to edit your execution file, but I don't know that he's talking about if someone distributes the execution file. That's not clear, so they might want to update that might be an issue, because they don't seem to care if you edit your execution file, but distributing a edited execution file might be a problem. So something that might want to be addressed in the later Q&A. Let's get the next one.
Will we ever get crab pots for fishing? We will be certainly considering crab pots for the next fishing major update. We're only planning one more fishing major update. We'll try and do as much fishing stuff in there. We've obviously had 2 fishing major updates. We don't want to overdo it, but we're very pleased to carry on with that stuff. I'm just mindful that we need to do other stuff as well.
All right, well, it's pretty straightforward. They do have ideas already of what they're going to do, so I don't know that giving them more ideas is going to change anything, but perhaps it will. So go ahead and submit your ideas, and if they don't have their feature list already locked in, perhaps they'll add your idea.
Will there ever be improvements to Microcontroller lure, such as an increased character limit? 8192? Do we go to 16k characters? 16k characters enough? I mean, 16k is quite a lot more. Probably could support that.
Okay, so this is a big one, 16K on the Lua script block. So that means that right now we've got 4,096 characters, I think it is, and they would bump that up to 16,000 characters. So that would give us a lot of leeway in the Lua script. And the main thing for me is I don't want to write a giant script so much as I want to comment the script. And a lot of my scripts end up breaking the limit because I'm trying to comment and then I have to take the comments out and then I have to shorten the names and stuff like that. But if you have a 16K limit, you can comment and still write the same amount of code. And of course, you can write more complicated code. But for the most part, I think just the fact that you can make a lot of comments in a script would be a big plus. And of course, those folks that need more room for their code, it would help them as well. So it looks like a 16K limit might be on the table. And one other thing that's worth noting is, I think it is Space Engineers has a mode for experimental, and that gives you more features. So perhaps that is something that they could do with Stormworks, is that an experimental mode would allow you to do larger scripts or have larger build areas and stuff like that, where they release the limits and say, by clicking experimental mode, you are possibly going to break the game by going past the limits that we feel are safe. So that might be something that they can do. And then servers would also have an experimental setting to say that we, support 16K Lua and stuff like that. I don't know. But maybe just on the client side for sure. So they're worried about people getting upset about the game lagging more if there's like large scripts or large vehicles. So if you just have that experimental button or experimental checkbox to say, I accept that the game is going to have possibly issues or crash due to larger scripts and larger vehicles, then, at least the user is clicking that button and they're aware, I clicked that button, so I might have some issues with the game. I don't know, just a suggestion, but it's just us here talking, so I don't think anybody else is going to hear the suggestion. But let's get to the next one.
What does your testing process look like? Is it automated or is there manual testing? Explain, please. So the testing process involves, we basically, our process starts out often on the support tracker or otherwise having a development plan, and we'll promote a issue onto our task board. Our task board's a bit like Trello, but it's not. It's a custom one, but it's to explain it, it's a bit like a Kanban board kind of thing, and that creates like a task to be worked on, and we kind of track all the information on that task, and that then gets developed, and then it gets moved into its testing phase. It gets moved into the kind of the testing column, if you like, and then the testing starts, and the tasks are typically now promoted into the testing phase, I would say at least 4 to 6 weeks before release. Sometimes it's less if it's a recent issue that we've created, but if it's an old issue or a new feature, then we typically give testing 4 to 6 weeks. There'll be often test vehicles created, or otherwise we'll be using test vehicles submitted by players on the issue tracker, or otherwise there'll be kind of like a testing procedure that we go through there in order to check that out. There's also some checklists behind the scenes as well, where for specific feature types, there's some things like creative components, for example. We've got a checklist of stuff that where we go through and we just go through the checklist of, okay, have we got this right for this component or this and this, and have we done all the whole list, because there's quite a lot of small little bits that are related to releasing a new component, for example, and we just go through that, and if we make a mistake we go back to the checklist, we add it on and make sure that the item is on the checklist so we don't make that mistake again. That is the testing process. We've also got some automated testing in that we've got the unit tests, and this is typically so that sometimes when we're doing a fix, we'll first of all create a unit test so that we get actual numbered metrics out, because once you change something, you've got a good jump back and forward between versions to see, okay, what was the behavior before, what's the behavior after. And in a game with Stormworks where there's so many different metrics around a component, not just like its mass or its weight, but often like with an engine, like the fuel consumption, there's the air consumption, the exhaust production, there's the power output, and then all in the different environments as well, and then obviously there's the turbo behavior. That's one we fixed recently, where we had the engines working correctly, but actually if you were using high pressure air input, they started to behave differently to how they had before, and we had to fix that. And I think in that case we did actually create a unit test, and we created the turbo engines unit test, And we got that set up, and then we developed the feature. Then it goes into testing, and then there's a certain number of weeks of time where the tester can go through and check it's correct. And stuff often gets moved back, and we look at it again, and then we move it forward again. So that is more or less our testing process.
One thing that would have been nice here is to tell us how they've changed their testing since the Space DLC dropped, and it was a terrible experience for a lot of people. So hopefully everything he talked about with the unit testing and the 4 weeks for the engineer to test and all that is new, and they weren't doing that before. And so now they have a test process that is going to, make releases smoother. And I think so far, this year at least, it's been pretty smooth. So I don't know. It looks like things are on the, what do you call it? The upper track? What is it called? The road, the higher road. Does that make sense? Higher. Let's get the next one.
Will gimbal input for radars, for uncaged missiles, for example, be added? I'm not sure. That is quite a specific request. So I'm not going to say never, but we're not planning on adding that to the list of features that we're going to implement right now. Will we get official blocks and parts modding support in the future? Well, you'll have to wait and see, but that is something we are very interested in doing. Certainly there's some incredible mods that the community has been coming up with without official support. I think everyone would like it if there was better official support for that and they were available on the workshop, because obviously that's going to make it a lot easier for people to subscribe to your mods, and it's going to make it a lot easier to basically distribute your mods to players. So that would be a very good thing for us to do, and we do support that. And yeah, very impressed with a lot of the actual file modding stuff that isn't one of the supported mod types. Is very, very impressive, especially the environment ones where people have created new components, new maps and stuff. Like some of the racing circuits are amazing. So yeah, it would be great to get that as like an official moddable aspect of the game. We'll see what we can do in the future.
Okay, this is a huge one, right? This is huge. They are not only for the past 2 Q&As acknowledging that mods exist. Before they used to call add-ons mods, the add-on missions or the add-on mission editor in the game. They used to call those mods before, like Mr. In Jersey. Oh, mods are bad. Oh my gosh, it's going to wreck my computer. But no, they're actually acknowledging mods as an actual mod now, and they are recognizing the community that have built maps and components, and this is a very good thing. So there should be less hate in the world for GeoMeta and Deltars about modding, because it looks like, and I mean, this is it. They're looking at it and saying, yes, we want to do it. And if Deltars says it more than once, usually that means that they're already working on it. So they are probably thinking about it, working on it, how they want to do it, how they're going to do it, and when they're going to release it. So hopefully the modding community can kind of breathe and say that, okay, in the future, the near future, modding is coming to Stormworks, or mod support is coming to Stormworks. And, this is a good thing. So I think the hate level on them ignoring mods, we should drop that down now and just wait and see what they do and provide suggestions without sarcasm, which is hard for me to do. But you guys can do it. Just no sarcasm. Just, give them suggestions of how mods should work and drop those in the forums without making demands. I think that's what is a turnoff when you make demands. I mean, I might be guilty of it too. But still, the idea is here, we're trying to be better people. They're trying to be better. We're trying to be better. So let's do that and get excited about modding coming to Stormworks. In fact, we have an awesome video tomorrow coming. So anyways, let's get to the next one.
When will there be more quality of life updates? We'd appreciate more of them. We obviously do a patch every 2 weeks there, so you can read the patch notes for every patch that happens every 2 weeks. And what you'll find is that with every patch there are quality of life improvements. It is a bit of a phenomenon that often we do add one feature to these updates, and there'll be 5 or 8 bug fixes on one feature, and all of a sudden players like, oh, where's the bug fixes? I don't get it. I think a lot of the people in the comments don't get it.
I think this is a fair statement. They are making bug fixes every week, even little ones, small ones, large ones. So they are doing that. I think that the people that are saying fix multiplayer and calling that a bug is not really fair because, in short, they have stated in the past that they have pretty much, I think, gone the limit of what they can do with the engine, and I don't think multiplayer is going to change. So what we have to do, and what I've done with the Convoy add-on, is work around the limits as much as possible. Hopefully they try and find some kind of, more optimization for multiplayer, but I don't think it's going to happen. And so to keep saying in the comments that they're not fixing bugs, I don't think that's fair. They are fixing bugs. Are they changing multiplayer? Are they optimizing multiplayer? Not anymore, I don't think. Is it going to be optimized in the future anymore? I don't think so. But, maybe. But what I would suggest is keep asking them, can you please revisit the network code and see if you can make it better? Can you please revisit multiplayer and see if you can make quality of life changes there? And then make the suggestions of what you're looking for. Now, if you say fix multiplayer and it's like, that's it, why, there's nothing to it, they're not going to be able to do much. So if you say, in multiplayer, this happens, can you take a look at this? Then they're probably going to respond better. But other than that, I think that what we have is what we're going to get. And hopefully the new game that they're working on, if it's something that we want to play, that they have built multiplayer from the ground up to support as many players and as many vehicles as possible within the technical limits. But we shall see. So there you go. Let's get to the next one.
Will we ever get a composite pivot input for radars similar to lasers or cameras? I see. Very similar request. I'll note that down then. Composite input for radar gimbal. The next question, when will you improve the commodities and missions? Career isn't very enjoyable at the moment. Well, commodities and missions. So we did recently do a missions change, didn't we? I've forgotten what was the new mission type. We've got a few more in progress, which is why I've lost track of which one we've released. But we've got a few different missions updates planned and on the way, and they'll be getting released over the next 6 months. And we're just constantly adding more stuff to do in the world. I suppose if you're playing the tutorial, like the basic, the career mode, where you're starting on the island, we're very happy to listen to feedback, and if people have specific missions they'd like, or a little bit more detail on exactly how they want that experience to play out, then we're very happy to hear from you and what that vision is, because it is a challenge delivering kind of action-packed career. There's the rescue missions, the delivery missions, there's the cargo transport with the containers and stuff. We did add the animal missions, I think, did we, recently? I don't want to start saying missions in case it's one of the ones we haven't added.
And there is your spoiler. The animal missions are coming in the near future. Very cool, I think. Maybe. Who knows? We'll wait for it and see what happens.
The next question from Mer is, what's the next big thing or DLC coming to Stormworks? We prefer not to announce it too far ahead. I think I have given a couple of hints already in this stream, but we haven't announced the dates yet, and we haven't announced specifically what's going to be in those updates. As I can see in chat, we're asking for hints. I think we've given some good hints there that there's potential for more fishing, and we are open to other major update ideas too.
The only hints I heard were adding more fishing stuff and crab pots. So maybe that's the only kind of hints he was talking about. But if I missed some other hints, let me know. Unless they're talking about the modding, maybe. But I think that the nets are going to lead possibly to cells, because if they've got the billowing of the net as it is pulled, then possibly they could reverse that so that wind could billow the nets, not nets, but cells outward. So hopefully that's the two things that are coming, modding and sales. So we'll see. Cross your fingers and hope for the best, and we'll see what happens.
Will you build expressways, motorways with multiple lanes? Probably not. I don't know whether we're going to do any more location updates, simply because they're not massively popular, and I think a bit of feedback we do get from players already is with our location updates that we have done, there's enough locations already in the game. The more built up spaces might just start to feel a little bit more empty because there wouldn't be traffic on the roads. So does that fully make sense? I'm not sure. So we're not planning on doing it, but that said, we would like to see the kind of the environment modding stuff become part of the game. And in that respect, I suppose I'm suggesting that that players might be able to mod that stuff in themselves if that's what they're into.
So as I listen to this again, it sounds very much like modding might be one of the next major updates, because he's mentioning it again. He's saying, no, we're not going to make more lands, possibly little ones if we do anything, but we're going to let the players possibly do that. So I think that is high up on the update board. So we'll see what happens, but I think modding is coming to Stormworks. I mean, he's embraced it quite a bit in these past two Q&As. So cheers to you, Deltars. You go.
Next question, will there be more sound-focused updates such as new jet sounds, muffled sound in vehicles, etc.? Don't know. I think we might have some sound effects in the bag that are waiting to be integrated, so there may be some sound-focused updates. The sound filters for in-vehicles and stuff, I mean, I do like the sound of this. Like, we've already got the data for like which compartments you're in, you know, because you've obviously got the sealed compartments, like when you're in a submarine and so on. We kind of have that data so that we can not have water in that space and things. So, you know, it's possible for us to say, oh, well, sound different if they're in a different room or whatever. That could be cool. But that's not currently in development, but that might be something that's possible. But sounds have generally been quite difficult for us. They are a challenge, and I think a lot of the sound libraries, sometimes you have sounds that are overdone, where there's just loads of resources for sounds you can use in a game, and then other times there are very difficult to get sound resources, where it's very difficult to get these sound libraries for a specific time of sound effect. I know that engines have been a massive problem from a development point of view in the past, where just the sound libraries are just very scarce and very limited, especially for a format like Stormworks, where you kind of want the sounds in layers, but they just don't get recorded like that, you know, because someone records an engine, they record all the parts of the engine, so it's very difficult to get that broken down into the layers so that we can, you know, have that interactive engine that is playing multiple different layers of sound for stuff. So it has been difficult to do the sound updates, but it is possible there will be more sound updates in the future. I don't think we've got anything on the board at the moment for the next 6 months, certainly. Many components are too expensive and relatively heavy. Is there any hope for rebalancing by Ure and Wind? There is hope for rebalancing, yes. I think we would be happy to look at this. That's obviously very easy for us to do, right? It's just changing some numbers. It's also possible that if there was broader modding support in the future, that it would be very easy for players to create mods. That changes the cost and weight of components, but I mean, you really want to get the vanilla game as well balanced as possible. So yeah, we're very open for that.
Okay, again, he's talking about mods. Do you see that? That's like, what, third or fourth time that for a question, not only is he answering the question about what they're going to do or not do, he's also bringing in the topic of mods. So that's very interesting. That might be the hints that are going throughout this Q&A. Possible modding in the future is coming sooner than we think. So very exciting. All right, Deltars, bring it, man. Bring it. This is great. If that's what you're doing, I think that's going to make a lot of people happy. I also think it's going to make the game more interesting. I also think that it's going to bring in more players as we get very very interesting mods going on, like the racing community, the war community with the trenches and all that stuff. And of course, the sky is the limit with modding. What kind of people it brings in? Who it could bring in a theater troupe, and we could have theater on the island. I'm kidding, but modding.
Do you plan to introduce a hydraulic mechanism that operates only with dedicated fluids? Hydraulics. We don't have a plan for this. I would love it. It's something we talked about in the studio, and I mean, to be honest, it's something we're considering for the new game. I think for the Stormworks situation, it's a little bit tricky because of how components are built with the block building system, and unfortunately, in Bullet, there's no point-to-point distance constraint. Whereas in other physics libraries, such as the one we're using for the new game, there is.
Did you catch that? For the new game, they're using a different physics library. Hello! All right, continue, Deltars.
So at that point, we've got to write our own physics code, which is a bit of a nightmare, to be honest. It's an area of specialty that we've not really done before. We have modified Bullet quite a bit for Stormworks, but we've never written a constraint before, and I think there's very specific maths that works and very specific maths that doesn't work. So there'll be quite a lot of learning to do that. So that is a kind of a technical blocking aspect of the hydraulic mechanisms in Stormworks. It's quite difficult, that one, unfortunately, but it would be awesome, right? Hydraulics are amazing. Next question, can we get ammo belts for machine guns and autocannon so we can finally build proper turrets? I suppose this is this flexible ammo belt stuff, isn't it? I think we've answered this a few times. I think the answer really is that it's just the physics constraint. It's just a bit of a pain. We're hesitant against this one, not because it's necessarily impossible, but because it basically involves adding a bunch of physics objects or otherwise kind of coming up with some kind of like flexible rope style thing.
Oh, this is the one that drives me crazy. I think we've been talking about this for about 2 years now. Has it been 2 years? It's probably been about 2 years. All you have to do, Deltars, you don't need a physical belt to take an ammo box component that you put in the wing. So it's like a Thales' gas tank, which looks like a flat block on the top and a gas tank on the bottom. So you'd have an ammo box, and it would look like the wing part on top. And then you would just draw your node like a rope to your gun, and that would be your flexible gun belt. So you have an ammo box and a node to the gun. That's all, just like a rope. That's all. You don't need a physical object because they're going to be placed in very small builds is what they want to use it for. They want to use it for the airplane wings and maybe the tanks. And all they want is a box of ammo and a node. That's all. Come on, Deltars. Come on, man. Come on. I've been suggesting this for 2 years. I think other people have too. So, yeah, try that. You don't need physical, physics all the time.
Next question. Can we paint the rotor blade accents, especially the red tail and spiral on the rotor? So, that's a good question. So, it's possible that we could add support for that. So yeah, please do create a feature request and we can consider that. Next question, will more train parts become available, for example inside cylinders or diesel cranks? Okay, I'm just going to have to read this one again and think what it means. Train parts, for example, inside cylinders or diesel cranks. More train parts. I see, so we're talking about kind of... So I don't really know my trains that well. I mean, they're very specific engine types, aren't they? You've got like the diesel electric stuff, and then obviously you've got the steam. Revisiting engines, I don't know. I don't know whether I've got the energy for it. The modular engine stuff, I think I said last time, has been a bit of a point of regret. It was difficult to balance it. And they are still a bit overheaty. So I don't know whether we'll be revisiting more engine parts. But it could happen in the future.
So I cut a lot of that out because he was talking a lot about different engine parts and problems. But the main thing to take away is that they don't really want to revisit adding more engine parts or changing engine parts as not to break more stuff on the workshop And they're working on the new game, which is probably going to simplify engines, I'm guessing, based on the kind of chit-chat that he's had the past 2 Q&As. So yeah. So I don't think you can ask for more engine parts and get a good response. I think what we have is what we have, and maybe just other new features as far as gameplay or parts where we put on our different vehicles is something that they will be doing. But I think engines are what the engines are for right now. Maybe minor tweaks based on, feature requests or something like that. But no new parts, I don't think. So I could be wrong, but we shall see.
So yeah, thank you very much. We are open to improving trains. I don't know whether we're going to be adding specific train parts in the next 6 months. Love the game, thank you very much. But any plans on expanding SAR missions / adding more immersive AI characters? We don't have plans specifically on SAR missions, I don't think. No, we added the man overboard missions, didn't we? So I suppose that is a SAR mission. We are certainly open to doing it. I think we'd really appreciate, I guess, a little bit of help. If you've got a specific idea for what the SAR mission experience could be like, do open a feature request, let us know. I think we'd be really happy to hear from you. Adding more immersive AI characters, I don't know about that either. I think probably not. I think a lot of this content stuff can be quite tricky to do, in terms of creating a more immersive character. Could be tricky. Next question, any chance for tank track rework, allowing different size wheels in one track, suspension, etc.? Yes, this is a great one. Will you ever add velocity pivots with power fluid output input? It's a good idea, really, isn't it? I'll note that down as well. So velocity pivots with power fluid data. Okay. Will audio logic be updated as it stands? It's only used is in multiplayer. Maybe add synth lure. So you're generating 88 kilobytes of data per second, which is quite a lot for Lua, so I don't think that's going to work. Lua's not fast enough, unfortunately, to do kind of like audio synth. I think you need it built in. Although maybe we could build it in the C++, so maybe we could just have an API for controlling the waveform. That would be cool. I'll note it down. It is a bit of a specific one. Lua audio synth generation. Is it going to work in multiplayer and so on? It might be more effort than it's worth, but I do like it. It's a cool idea. Certainly no promises. Unlikely, to be completely honest. It's probably unlikely, but I do like it. Next question, would Stormworks ever get a VR DLC? It's unlikely.
In short, VR will make you sick. VR is technically a pain in the butt. It's going to be very niche right now, and it's probably not worth the effort for Stormworks. That's basically it. I agree with that. I don't think we need VR for Stormworks unless it was like some third party did it and they just supported it, because it's a pain in the butt. And I don't think it's going to work properly in Stormworks. And we already have a lot of other things that we need to be tweaked and added to Stormworks. At least I think so. So that's my opinion, and I think that's what Deltars thinks too. Just no VR. No VR.
Let's go to the next question. Will we ever get 2 wide small tank tracks? I swear to God we've got these. This came up last time.
So this is kind of funny. This is just him revisiting the update that they did with the tank tracks a while back where they added the wrong size. They thought they added the one that everybody was asking for, but it turned out to be the wrong one. What everybody wanted was a small wheel that was too wide, and that would be used for tanks, like smaller tanks. The track was too thin, so we just needed 2 wide ones. So it sounds like, yes, they're going to revisit that, and we'll finally get the tank track that everybody was waiting for. So that's cool.
Any plans to add flow rate sensors? What about the overheating bug for oil distillation? Plans to add flow rate sensor. Yeah, that's a good idea, isn't it? With the intermediate parts like a valve and so on, they can cause like a reduction in flow just because of how the fluid system works. But we could potentially just put a sensor on the existing valves data output if we've got the logic space for it. I think that would be easy enough to do. So flow rate sensor, flow rate data output on valves. I will note that down. That sounds like a good change that we could potentially make. Thank you. 454, thank you very much. And the next question, will pressure be fixed? Pressure localization, it is a little bit on the slow side, but I think that's kind of on purpose to kind of communicate to the player what's happening rather than it being a very, very sudden thing. That, you know, you open the door and there's air inside and there's a constant flow of air going outside, for example, if you're in space. And that's kind of on purpose to slow that mechanic down just so players have a bit more time to react to what's going on. So they've got a chance to close their door before they lose all of their air, for example. And certainly with like under the water situations, for example, if you open a door, then water will flood in, but it will also displace the air in the compartment, which will then get pushed out, and the air will get exhausted as the water pushes in. And that is a mechanic. So we think it's working. If it's not for you, then please do file a bug request, and we're happy to consider. But as far as I know at the moment, it is working as intended. Will dual wheels be added in some way? Maybe wheels with power nodes on both sides. So yeah, the old double wheel for trucks and stuff. That is something we discussed actually just last week. It's something we're open to doing. We haven't done it yet. I don't like talking about features that we haven't actually developed yet, but I imagine we did discuss it, and we did say, well, could we have like a checkbox on wheels, for example? So it's because you can go to the properties of a regular wheel to change its radius. Maybe there could also be an option for changing it to a double wheel. Any plan for a higher precision update for guns? Yes, there is. I think it got asked for last time, didn't it? And I noted it down, and I discussed it with the team, and we created a task, and it should hopefully happen at some point this year. Next question, will aerodynamic, hydrodynamic drag be reworked for higher efficiency, lower load on engine? So I do agree it would be better if the water was less treacly and the air was less treacly, and generally there's a bit more of a realism balance there. However, I guess the challenge with Stormworks, as we've said before, and it's the same answer I've given many times, is that we're trying to build everything from the same set of blocks. So your different vehicles are all made from the same types of blocks, and that's not how real vehicles are made, right? Aircraft are made from very specific type of engineering, often aircraft grade aluminium, and then you've got trucks that are made from a lot of heavy steel. You've got trains that are obviously, you're taking that steel and you're making it 4 times thicker. You've got like just a train wheel is probably heavier than a lot of aircraft. So you've just got very different mechanical engineering properties on different types of vehicle, and so just generalizing that with a single set of blocks to gamify it in many sense doesn't make sense, and that's kind of how we've ended up in this situation where we're trying to make this slightly nerfed version of physics in order that your various vehicles might not behave exactly how they would in the real world, but they all kind of work and they're all kind of interactive and can exist in the same simulation, and it's actually quite a challenging thing to do. So it's difficult. What I will say is in a future game I would like to achieve a different balance.
In short, in a new game, we might get different air physics and water physics. If that's the new game, I don't know. But for this game, what we have is what we have. The only thing that I would like to see is some kind of block that is doing what we are doing with the glitches, the wheel glitch, the rocket glitch, and what's the other glitch? The pivot glitch, to make things float or lighter. It would be nice just to have some kind of block, and maybe that's what a modding block might be, so that you can like click on the block and like choose its buoyancy or something like that. That would be something that might help make the game feel a little bit better when you're struggling with a boat or a seaplane, in my case, Or maybe you want a hot air balloon. So yeah, that would be something cool. Just a block like that. Make a suggestion in the feature list. I think they've blocked me.
Next question. When will more building blocks be added that everyone has been asking for and wanting for I imagine that says a long time? I don't know. You'd have to be a bit more specific. I'm not sure what more building blocks that everyone's been asking for means. But certainly, you've got a specific block you want, you can always file a feature request. Would it be possible to get pivots that move using RPS? I suppose we've got the robotic parts, which is like the pivots and the hinges and so on, and then we've obviously got the torque parts, which is like wheels and tank tracks. And I suppose the suggestion here is that we're going to go across, and I mean, I think that's a good idea. I think being able to go from one thing to another is great. I think it's just the energy conservation stuff. I mean, I'll reflect on this saying that's kind of it's something we've been thinking about with a new game. Yeah, but I don't know. I think probably not is the answer, just because it's difficult from an energy conservation point of view. Maybe it is possible, you know. I will note that down. So what we're saying, torque-based pivots. Will the radar noise ever be removed? Will the radar be removed? Probably not. It's not planned, and I don't think there's too much radar noise there, and certainly there's plenty of players who are able to just create the most incredibly accurate and effective radar missiles currently with the existing system. Can you add buzzers with a composite input so that pitch, instrument and volume is varied? We could do composite input, buzzer, composite input. Noted down. It's possible. Obviously, we've already got the properties, haven't we? I'll move on. Any more handheld items like jerry cans? Also a chance of cables, pulleys being able to go through something. Handheld items like jerry cans. I suppose the design point of view here is that we are struggling with our consumable items because there's not really a way to recharge them or kind of loot them or discover them in the game. So you know, you just spawn everything, don't you, from the workshop, and that's the mechanic of the game. Certainly, I think that will be for a future game. I think it would make more sense in Stormworks. I don't think consumables work well with the game design. And also with just the fuel handling just isn't a massive part of the game because everything gets spawned from the workbench. So there's not the real need to refuel vehicles on the go.
This is kind of an interesting point because I've been working on a seaplane, and something that I've been trying to implement is like wear and tear on the engine, and it doesn't make sense when I started doing it, or after I did it for a bit, testing it, because once you spawn something, it doesn't live in the world for an extended period of time because you'll despawn it, or you can only run one vehicle at a time, so there's no real lifespan of a vehicle. So I kind of took it out of my build, but he makes an interesting point. Like, there's really no point in doing a lot of things. A jerry can might be okay, like if you got to go refuel maybe someone that broke down or something like that. But as far as like other things, like fuel management and wear and tear, it's just not something that's part of the game mechanics. So yeah.
Could you make fishing nets customizable for decoration, for example? Paintable, opaque surface, etc. We could do. It's probably quite tricky. I'll note it down, but it's probably going on the list of difficult, so probably not this year. Next question: will resource gathering, such as mining ores and getting liquid like gas and oil, be improved? I think it does work at the moment. We're open to doing stuff, as I've said. I'd have to have a specific request really to respond. Next question: any updates on the Stormworks-like game? Oh dear. So yeah, I'll give a quick update. I think the strategy has been to refer to it as not Stormworks 2, as being this kind of clever marketing strategy to kind of disconnect us between the new game and Stormworks. And the point really is for us to do a new game that isn't got all the baggage of Stormworks. So I'll quickly talk about this. Stormworks is continuing. It's continuing for the foreseeable future. It's not going to stop development because we do a new game, even if we do a new game that's a building game. And I think that's because Stormworks is always going to have its place, and it's always going to have its relevance as a specific type of building game. We're not really interested in making a Stormworks 2, mostly because there's already Stormworks. It's in its 7th year of live development. We were developing it for years before it actually even got released. So, I mean, you're talking about a game that's been in development for almost 10 years now, and when you consider that it takes 10 years to get Stormworks to where it is now, just consider how long it's going to take us to make Stormworks 2, a game which I think players would expect to be Stormworks and better. So it's going to take more than 10 years. So none of you guys want to wait 10 years, right? It's too long. I don't necessarily want to do it for 10 years either. So it's kind of like an impossible situation. And then I think you might say, well, how about you release Stormworks 2 as early access and just develop it in the same way you develop Stormworks? I think the problem is I think players aren't going to enjoy that. I think the player expectation for Stormworks 2 is that it's Stormworks but better. And it's just going to take too long to make. Stormworks has taken 10 years to get here. It's got so many features. It's got so many different stuff you can do in it. It's going to be very difficult to compete with Stormworks. And honestly, I don't think there's really a point. I think we're just going to end up making the same game. It's going to have a lot of the same limitations. So I think we're interested in making a different game, a fundamentally different game. The challenge we're getting is that everyone compares it to Stormworks because, we're the Stormworks developer, and it's going to have vehicle building in it. So you're talking about basically players thinking, well, how's it going to compare with Stormworks? I'm trying to understand it. I'm understanding it in the terms of being a Stormworks expert. A lot of you have many, many hours. It's just going to be too difficult. So I think we want to make a new building game, and I think there's a lot of cool stuff we can do, but I think it's going to be a huge challenge for us because of the expectation that we're making something that is in some way related to Stormworks. And what we want to do is we want to make a new building game that is doing a lot less to a much higher standard. And when I say a lot less, I mean a lot less. So, we've been in development for 10 years. For Stormworks, maybe we're adding 10% of those features, and maybe we're spending twice as long or 3 times longer on each feature to make it higher quality and more in depth. And then maybe we don't want to do all the features from Stormworks. Maybe we want to have some new ideas. So actually that's only going to be 5% of Stormworks, with then 50% of the new game being new stuff. And I think that for players makes a lot of sense because you don't need a Stormworks 2, you've already got Stormworks. Having a new experience that perhaps does things better and approaches building games in a different way would be interesting and engaging. But yeah, the big challenge is that we're going to get hammered, right? We're going to come out, everyone thinks it's going to be Stormworks 2, it's not, and everyone's going to be very upset with us. So I think that's just the risk. Carrier Command 2 went well, we did Carrier Command 2, but it's more obviously, it's not. Carrier Command 2 was never really compared to Stormworks, and every time someone discusses our new game, it's always in comparison to Stormworks. It's a very, very challenging problem for us. So I think we're going to stop calling it not Stormworks 2. We're just going to try and I guess talk about it perhaps with a proper name.
Okay, well, I think that's important. I think that's important what he's saying, and I think I agree with him. Like everything that they do now, a new game is going to be compared to Stormworks if it's a building game. And obviously they're doing a building game, they're doing a new physics engine, they're doing a different type of building system. It sounded like before in the Q&A that it would have multiplayer building. And during this, I don't know if we passed already, but during this part of the Q&A, he said something about that he did not like how the editor worked inside of a workbench rather than outside. So that's something that he talked about. So these are all little clues about what the new game is focusing on. And he did not like the modular engines, so whatever the new game has is probably going to be, more like, I'm guessing, Trailmakers, where you have a set of engines and you drop them in. So I think that's kind of where it's headed, and people are not going to be happy about that. and that's hard to manage when you are so into Stormworks that you want the next game to be like Stormworks, but that's not what it's going to be. So it's important to manage our expectations now, that if you love Stormworks, stick with Stormworks, and if the new game is interesting, that'll be a new game and not Stormworks. So it's hard. It's hard to manage. But yeah, manage expectations. Stormworks is going to continue. Sounds like they're going to get modding in, and it will live a longer life. It may not get a better multiplayer experience, but it will live a longer life. So, yeah.
That has been answered. That's the new game. Do you have plans to rebalance the career mode economy and progression? Already asked by Yoran Wind, I think. And yes, we're very happy to look at that. Next question, will better performance or better looking tyres be added? The current tyres are terrible. Probably not.
This is another example where modding comes into play. If they're doing it, we already have modded rims and tires. And so as soon as modding is supported, you have that new tires and new rims. So there you go.
Are you going to add part deforming or detaching? Like if you hit something, parts will fall off. So vehicle destruction and damage is probably, well, it's not going to happen. I think it's because there's a certain phase when you spawn your vehicle, it does some calculations behind the scenes, particularly for buoyancy, where there's a buoyancy generation phase. There's also a physics optimization phase, and this just it's not that slow, but it can take half a second or so. For bigger vehicles, it can take longer, and I think if you're talking about breaking vehicles up and changing their buoyancy properties and their physics properties, then that means that data needs to get recalculated, and that's going to basically freeze the game for half a second potentially, which is obviously not the experience you want. For Stormworks, it's a bit on the difficult side, so probably dynamic damage, probably not. It's probably going to be like the non-breaking off part physics, that damage system that we've currently got, I think is the best damage system for Stormworks. Unfortunately, it's just that technical limitation. It's very difficult to get this rich kind of baked in data for the buoyancy stuff, and also be able to update that in a quick way where you can have your vehicles shapes getting changed and potentially broken in two. Are there any updates on the rail blocks? Yes, you did ask about this. We did discuss it. We've kind of decided against it, I think. No, I can't remember. We did discuss it. What happened? I can't give you a quick answer on that. I suppose it is tricky, but it would be good to be able to unload trains and stick them on a transport vehicle or whatever, but you could kind of already do that if we just allowed train blocks to be detachable. I think it would be quite good if that was the case, if you had a node for releasing train wheels or something, so that you could potentially lift a train off the tracks and stick it on a boat, move it to the other island, unload it or whatever. It's the kind of thing that you should be able to do in Stormworks, really. Probably not, but it could still happen. Sorry, I can't commit to anything.
So I had to cut it down, but what he does say is he does mention modding again, and he does mention that possibly laying down new tracks by modders could make this feature possible. See? They're thinking about modding.
Can we have an option to bump up the resolution of smaller screens, like the 1x(n), 2x3 screens? Yeah, I mean, it's not impossible that we could set it to be programmable. I think it's just the stress is just the performance impact, because rendering these screens is a little bit on the expensive side, and some of the Lua scripts are also a bit on the expensive side, and ultimately we just want to make sure that the game is getting a reasonable performance in the most possible cases.
So again, this is where I suggest that checkbox, experimental or advanced, or probably experimental is the best word. That's what Space Engineers uses. And the idea is if you check this experimental box, you can get the higher res monitors, yes. You can get the 16K Lua, yes. You can get a giant build area with no restriction, yes. And it says, if you check this box, you are agreeing that your game experience may be really bad, and we're not responsible for it. Knock yourself out, have a good time, but don't come running to us if the game crashes or doesn't run. That's it. Checkbox.
I think we might have discussed this before and decided that the performance impact was too great to do it, but we'll discuss it again. screen resolution option. Okay, let's carry on, thank you. And will there be a setting for disabling compressed gases? No. Will the train tracks be remodeled? I think you're probably asking for higher resolution stuff with like ballast and sleepers and so on, and I think increasing the poly count just for train tracks and the rest of the world being this low poly thing doesn't really make sense. Next question, if you had to do Stormworks over again, what's the most substantial thing you'd change? It's a great question. I love to think about this stuff. There's so many things that where we feel like the fundamentals would be better to change. I think ultimately the biggest fundamental thing with Stormworks, I think I'm not a big fan of the workbench. I look at other building games like loads of our competitors, right? Like Space Engineers, Scrap Mechanic. These games you're building in first person and there's no specific workbench. You're building in first person in the world with components in a kind of continuous thing. Stationeers is a great example, and you just kind of create this kind of like survival gameplay, I suppose, in that sense, in that you can modify your vehicle anywhere, but likewise there's kind of a relation to you creating something where you're not necessarily just going in and respawning it, and you start to get this kind of like, I guess, the compatibility with a survival game. And I think that's fundamentally probably the thing that I would most like to change. It would fundamentally change what Stormworks is, but you suddenly start to engage with these different design aspects. That Stormworks is a designing game. You're designing stuff, and I think a lot of the players are obviously design oriented. They are designers, and that's the joy of Stormworks, is that for many players it's a gamification of the design process, and I think if you look at real design, a huge amount of real design is how things are built. How is something actually going to be built in the real world, because you can design things that are actually impossible to construct, and that's a big part of engineering. And then there's, I suppose, just the relationship of your vehicle and the world. I think the whole concept that people never refuel their vehicles because they just go back to workbench to refuel their vehicle, I think that sucks. I think it'd be great to be designing these vehicles and pushing the aspect of the vehicles being used more and more and more, because you're already getting players really engaging with the part of the joy of Stormworks vehicles is that you do go on, you crew them and you use them, and you go to different rooms to do different things, and there's different stations, and then when you're designing things you're thinking about what am I doing in that position, and what are the controls I need, and what are the best design aspects for improving that situation for players. So that's just my thought on that stuff. I can see in the chat someone likes the workbench, and you get the mirroring tools, and there's all sorts of tools in the workbench that make designing a bit easier, or a lot easier in some cases, and it's got that kind of CAD interface, and it's a trade-off. I think what I'm suggesting is saying, that's a bit of a regret. I've got to acknowledge that some parts of the game would definitely be better, but some parts of the game would actually be worse as well. Such is true with everything. So thank you for the great question. I did enjoy answering that one.
So Diltars tends to reveal what they're working on little by little. When he talks about something passionately, when the space DLC was going to be coming out, he talked about a lot of space during the Q&As. And so for this one, I think this relates to the new game, is that he said it at least 2 or 3 times during this Q&A, that he really wants the vehicle to be something that exists in the world for a longer time and has kind of like properties to it of being used for a longer period and not just respawned and rebuilt brand new. So maybe whatever is coming out with the new game is kind of a survival aspect of the block building game, where your vehicle is more important than just being something you build once and throw it away. It might be something that you build and improve upon as the game goes on, as you're surviving or whatever it is. I'm just guessing here, But it is a building game. It is going to be a workbench outside of a room like we have now. What else did he say early on? Oh, I forgot. Oh, simplistic engine modeling, and I mean, he didn't say simplistic engine modeling, but that suggested that engines are going to be pre-made or simple, and other aspects are going to be less than we have in Stormworks. So it sounds like it could be a survival game that is block building, and that you are kind of focused on keeping your vehicle alive in the world, and it doesn't just respawn constantly. It's being built and fixed and tweaked as you go. But I don't know. This is all just me making stuff up, but I just try to listen to what Deltar says and try to figure out what kind of game they're working on. But there you go. Let me know in the comments below if you have suggestions on what kind of game you think the next game is. It's not Stormworks 2, but it is a building game.
Will the multiplayer player limit be increased? No, I don't think so. Will cooling and heating of compartments be a thing? I think it is at the moment. I think we did add that in. I think that heaters heat the contents of the fluid inside your compartment, which is often the air. I'm not sure. I'll note that down. I'll discuss with the players if it isn't, but I think it might already be. Compartment temperature. Will jet engines get more thrust at some point? Probably not. I think they are already pretty overpowered. I think they're the most powerful engine at the moment, so probably not. Will we ever get alternative fuels for engines like hydrogen, CNG? This question does seem to come up every one. We have answered this last time. The answer is probably not, and that's because it doesn't really add anything to the game. Are there any updates planned that would improve the automated situation? There's the grip wheel stuff that I did discuss before. We haven't done it yet, but we would like to have another look at that. I think that is the main thing, really, that is going to improve vehicles a lot. Next question, will you add more ammo for the light machine gun for aircraft? The answer, I don't. Making the ammo box bigger for the light machine gun specifically. Yes, we will. I think someone asked that last time. We did mark it down. We are planning on doing that. Any chance to increase the build size at docks without us having to mess with the game files? No.
Again, this is where the experimental button comes in. Say, yes, we're going to have an experimental button, and if you click it, you take responsibility for a larger build area. But yeah, so far, they're not doing that. I hope they do.
Are fishing nets testing for sales? I mean, fishing nets, sales, you can see that. You can see the relation there, haven't you? We didn't really think about it at the time. There is the kind of obvious follow on there, I suppose. I guess the challenge is the stuff I discussed last time. It's the physics, isn't it? It's the water's a bit treacly. How well a sailboat's going to work? Are they just going to immediately topple over because the wind pushed on the sail a bit? I don't know. So many players have asked for sails. We'd love to do it. It's just a question. We don't want to do it and do it badly. So would be cool, wouldn't it? Triangular sail, I don't know. I mean, you can have basically a triangular net if you put two of the nodes really close together, can't you? It'd be cool. We're not working on sails at the moment. We could do in the future. It's a great update idea. Doing the nets does make us closer to sails, but does it make it something that we can do and make players happy with us? We'll see. We'll see. Are the creations used in the snapshots posted anywhere? Yes. Take all of the creations that get posted in the announcements. They're in the Discord, they're in the vehicle showcase panel. If you want to get featured in a vehicle announcement update that happens on Wednesdays, then we're doing the announcement updates at 5 p.m. on Wednesdays. We typically harvest screenshots from earlier in the day on Friday, sometimes Thursday afternoon. It just depends when we write the announcement. So do post your screenshots in vehicle showcase channel on the Discord. Would you consider adding farming? We would, but it's not on the board right now, and we do have to ask ourselves, is it a good idea in terms of further diluting, I suppose, the focus of Stormworks? A lot of players have asked about search and rescue content and so on. We're going to carry on working on the game, obviously, and I think for the foreseeable future. It's just that is farming the next thing, but the farming creations, right? Like all the farming vehicles you can build, it will be quite fun. I do like the idea. It's something we've discussed. It's definitely not being worked on, I'll promise you that. Definitely not this year. The next question, will there be colour sensors for autonomous vehicles? The challenge here is that we need to be able to sample the colour. That has to happen on the CPU. You can't read data back off the GPU. It's just something you mechanically can't do. It's very but it's a performance problem. You can't read the data, so we'd have to set up all the game data so that we can then go and query geometry and so on the CPU. That's not a straightforward thing to do. There's a lot of work to do just that simple function. I have a lot of ideas for career missions. What's the best for those? Definitely the issue tracker. Please open a feature request. Please try and keep it, I guess, to the point. We do like the detail, but certainly, just a clear worded feature request on the issue tracker is always appreciated. Thank you so much. Can we have some sort of Doppler effect implemented? The good old Doppler effect. No, I don't think so. Do you plan to add more Windows/module windows? Not really. I think official support with more windows is...
So he goes on and talks about windows as he has before in past Q&As, where he says there's too many window blocks. We think we have enough window blocks, and we don't want to add more blocks. But something he didn't bring up, which I was surprised, is he did not bring up Thales' Windows mod, which I thought he would bring up modding again. Maybe it just slipped his mind, but I think that is a solution for the Windows. If they're adding modding, then Thales' Windows blocks will surely be added by Thales. So that being said, there's also been a lot of suggestions by people that a block doesn't have to be added for, a new block doesn't have to be added for every block that you want. So for example, if you want a 1x1 wedge, you add a wedge block that represents many wedges. You would click on that wedge block, and then a little menu would come up where you could change the wedge to a 1x1, a 1x2, 2x2, 1x3, 1x4, 1x5, and so on. And so all the different block variations would live in a single block represented in the library. And that way you would have less blocks in the library and more blocks based on the type of block. So, for example, again, a cube could be a 1x1 cube. It could also be a 1x2 cube or a 2x2 cube. And that gives you a larger building block where you could fill up more space and use less blocks. Stuff like that would probably help the editor. I think, I could be wrong, I think it's very much doable that you could add larger cubes, and then it would pull down or bring back the lagginess because you're using less blocks to fill up a space. I don't know if I'm right or wrong about that. Don't know exactly how the engine works, but it would be an interesting mod to see happen. All right, let's keep going.
Why you can't add new block and wedges. You promised it in 2018, and today it was not implemented. I don't think I did promise it in 2018. I mean, I probably did, right? Like, this isn't my first dev Q&A. I've said a lot of things in this chat. I think I normally do precurse things to say, these are our intentions. I think we're being as transparent as we can do. We don't want to talk about stuff and give players false hope on stuff, but likewise we don't want to be negative about stuff and then go and implement it later on. I would say that it's very unlikely that we did actually promise anything, but maybe I did say something. I've said a lot of stuff.
I've been pretty happy with the past two Q&As that Deltars has been doing on the Steam page by himself. I think that he's been honest. I think that he's not really held back anything other than when it comes to like what we're working on, that kind of stuff. But as far as his answers, he's been honest. And I think it's been a better year for Stormworks because I think that Deltar's attitude has changed slightly, and he is trying to give a proper response to the questions. And he's been saying no, yes, and I don't know. And that's all you can ask for, I think, in a developer. So very cool. Keep it going, Deltars. Keep it going.
Can you add more sound effects to engines like a drop-down menu since you don't plan on adding more? I think that is meant to say. Again, the engine sound effect stuff. is a problem for us. Future file modding support could potentially allow you to change the sound effects on stuff.
Okay, that's modding. So what he's suggesting is perhaps in the near future, if modding is supported directly on the workshop, somebody uploads a block with a drop down on it like a buzzer, and it contains all the custom sounds that you can select from. There you go. I don't know if they would be able to do a custom sound on an engine, but who knows? Maybe depending on how much access they give modders to creating things, that could be possible, so that you could do a drop down on an engine and then select the engine sound. But I'm not sure if that's possible. It might be too much tied to the block itself, but the modders would probably know better than me. But yeah, so there you go. I mean, I think it's good. He's suggesting that mods might be something that enable new blocks to be created, and they can take their hands off on some of these things and focus on bigger features. So that's good.
If we get around to doing that major update, that would be pretty cool, right? It would be similar to some of the existing file mods that you currently get with, I think it's Storm Loader. It's kind of pushing a bunch of that stuff. I don't know if that's the way it's done at the moment, but it's that kind of style of modding that could potentially make a lot of sense to get that stuff working on the workshop, so that players could actually create mods of sounds themselves if they want a specific engine effect. I've already discussed the sounds and the challenges previously in this stream. Will new improvements to other engines, jet engines, seem outdated? Will they get an overhaul? Jet engines seem outdated. Will they get an overhaul? From White Noise, thank you for the question. I don't know. I mean, I think it's difficult to make a positive impact on a live serviced game with some of these changes, particularly when the jet engines aren't necessarily not working. They do work as the specified, and there's certainly improvements. There's certainly ways that we'd want to do it differently in the future. I'd like to see jet engines in a future game, I will say that. I don't know whether necessarily taking stuff out of Stormworks, then changing it and adding it back in, is necessarily a good idea for the general experience of players. Why do you use weird units like turns instead of radians or degrees? So I think we're trying to avoid the Stormworks being too sciencey, I suppose. So and also we don't want Stormworks to be too real world physics stuff. I think we discussed this stuff in the past. We've used turns just because it's a bit more of a generic and easy to understand value, and it was also, when we were adding it, it was compatible with the existing, like before we had all the data logic systems and stuff. In early Stormworks, you'd have like the throttle lever, and you'd be controlling, you know, your rudder with the steering wheel and the throttle lever, and that stuff was going -1 to 1. So it was also in a similar kind of range to the values that you might want to use anyway, without necessarily making it more difficult to make vehicles. But yeah, you know, radians and degrees are a more common unit. I don't think it really matters as long as it's clear what the unit is. I think that's the important thing. And atmospheres, again, we just picked atmospheres. It seemed to be the most easy to understand. One atmosphere is what you're breathing right now. It's just easy to understand, and I think we're just trying to make it a bit more accessible. I don't think it really matters what unit we use as long as we're consistent. So that we're just trying to be consistent with that stuff. Could you please add composite output to net anchors? Net anchor composite output. We'll discuss it. Can't hurt, can it? It's easy to do. We'll discuss it, and we'll look at what the priority of it is, and no promises, but seems like a reasonable request.
See, this is one of those things where I make comments when it was released, because it doesn't make sense to me that you're not going to use composite on a new component anymore. It seems like every component that comes out that's new, unless there's a very good reason why you would only want it to be the Boolean or the number, you would always want a composite, right? Am I right? Am I wrong? Let me know in the comments below. It just seems like a no-brainer. New components, composite first, a number or Boolean second. But I don't know. Maybe I'm missing something.
When will you implement a Linux dedicated server support for Stormworks? We will not.
So I cut this down a lot. If you want to hear the full dialogue, he talks about the basic thing is it's very difficult to keep Stormworks working with all the other platforms and have the same user experience as with Windows. And Linux is a pain in the butt with drivers, and they just don't want to mess with it. They want to just focus on one platform and make it the best they can. So if you want to hear the full dialogue, I kind of cut things down really short. Use the link below and listen to it, and you can try to understand why they are focusing on fewer platforms rather than more. All right, let's keep going.
Will the game get low-end computer support? I mean, I think it does. At this point, we haven't changed the spec requirements since we released. But yeah, I think the performance issue that Player is probably talking about there is low power laptops, and unfortunately they haven't been getting very much. They haven't been getting a lot faster over the years. Yeah, it would be great to improve the performance for everyone, but the minimum specs on Stormworks are pretty low. But yeah, I do acknowledge that some players are getting performance issues on low power laptops, these budget laptops that are very, very popular, that have integrated graphics and then also don't have very good cooling. It's difficult to answer that one, but I would say it's actually possible to play Stormworks on a lower end PC. I think you just got to keep in mind that you might not be able to spawn the biggest vehicles. Possibility for handheld end effectors for logic on off number like a keypad or something. Possibility for handheld end effectors for logic on off a number like a keypad. Oh, I see. So you kind of want to have like a handheld tool. The handheld items are a bit of a pain. I mean, it's possible. That's the first time I've seen that requested, so I think it would have to be a frequent request because these handheld items are a bit of a pain to add. So it'd have to be a popular request. It's just a little bit difficult.
All right, so that is where the Q&A ended. He goes on to thank all the folks that have put time into Stormworks and content creators and all that stuff. Not me because he hates me, but he did mention a lot of other people. And so that is where it ended. So I think this was a really good Q&A, and it's pretty cool because we're hearing a lot about modding being mentioned. And I think that means that modding is on the horizon, and I think that they're going to support it as best they can. And hopefully that will calm down the modding community, like myself, who have been wanting mods. And I think that it's going to make the game last a lot longer, make the game a lot more interesting, make builds a lot more interesting. And if they do it right, it won't be something where it breaks a build if you don't have that mod. So if you don't have the mod, it will, request it or something like that. Like, what is the game? Oh, EXE Red 2. So if you don't have a mod on a server, it will automatically download that mod and install it when you play multiplayer so that you are compatible with the server you're moving into. I don't know if that's going to be possible. And maybe just blocks and land. They did talk about land quite a bit, which is interesting, which means the whole world could be built out in a completely different way. So we're going to have some modders on tomorrow. Today is June 1st, but tomorrow we're going to be hanging out with some modders, and we're going to be seeing, I guess, some new NSO stuff. So we'll see what happens. So that's it for today. Thanks for joining me. I'm Endo, and if you enjoyed this video, let me know by leaving some comments below. Leave a like, leave a dislike. I don't care. Just interact with me any way you want, because I like it. All right, that's it for today. I'll see you next time.